Chapter 33. By mid-January 2019, we'd been married 4.5 months and still hadn't taken our honeymoon. Now, granted, we'd had doctor's appointments and the holidays and plenty of other legitimate reasons to put it off, but I felt like it was time to make it happen, so Michelle and I started discussing our options. I really wanted to take her to Italy. She'd never left the country before, and I could picture us in a gondola in Venice being leisurely propelled to an indolent melody of accordions and flutes. But Michelle would need a passport first. We didn't want to wait that long, so we wanted to leave the country, so we figured a cruise would be the logical choice, as it wouldn't require a passport, but it would still allow us to visit somewhere outside the U.S. And we figured about a week would be perfect, so I found a 7-day Carnival cruise that would, it was to the Bahamas, and it would depart from a port in Charleston, South Carolina, depart and return to a port in Charleston, South Carolina in early February. And Charleston is about 8 hours away from Lexington, so we figured it would probably be just as easy to drive as it would be to fly. So I bought the tickets, and a couple of weeks later, we were on our way to the Bahamas. And I've traveled quite a bit, and I know it's best to not overpack. Somehow I was able to convince Michelle of this too. And I knew she would tire easily, so we worked with the cruise line staff, and they were awesome. They gave us a wheelchair and let us skip to the front of the line to embark, and God bless them for it, because even with their help, Michelle was exhausted by the time we got to the cabin. And I was too. We left Lexington around 2 a.m. that morning, and I hadn't slept since the night before. And by now, I was pushing 36 hours without sleep. But before I turned in, I explored the ship real quick just so I'd know where everything was and I could orient myself. And Michelle was still up when I got back, and man, we crashed hard. We slept for probably about 14 hours straight, and clear up until the next day, clear up until the next morning, and just comfortably snuggled up next to each other. And we woke up feeling refreshed. And I took Michelle on a little tour of the ship and showed her where to find all the good stuff, like the fajita bar and Guy Fieri's burger joint and the casino, and of course the 24/7 soft serve ice cream cone machine. I'm not exaggerating when I say we both gained at least 10 pounds apiece on that trip. If you knew where to look, the food was great and virtually unlimited, and we ate dozens and dozens of ice cream cones a day. Now, Michelle didn't gamble, but I took a couple $100 to play with, and she watched me give it back and forth at the craps tables every night just to break even by the end of the week. And she would tire too quickly to do much walking, but with the wheelchair, we made sure to get off the ship every time it stopped somewhere new. At a place called Jackson's Wood Carvings in Freeport, we bought souvenirs. A beautiful hand-carved cross about a foot tall, and a gorgeous but very stout hardwood walking stick that was more like a staff than a cane. I picked the sturdiest one they had, over 4 foot long and as big around as your wrist. And I fashioned a strap for it, and for the rest of the trip I either had it in my hand or wore it across my back like a sword. And we got quite a few looks over it too. Some amused, some wary, and a few just envious that they didn't also have a beautiful piece of art such as mine that doubled as a lethal weapon. And Michelle just shook her head and laughed. By now, she was more than familiar with my antics. But she also knew it wasn't just for show, and that I bought it with the intention of carrying a weapon. Cruise or not, we were in a foreign country, and that staff was as stout as a baseball bat. Now, folks at Jackson's, they're wonderful people, and they prayed with us with a earnest, simple, beautiful compassion that moved us. And after praying together, we left their shop. Michelle was in the wheelchair. She had that foot-tall wooden cross in her hand, and me pushing her across the sand-covered road with a giant staff strapped across my back. And we laughed at the image of us as two Christian pilgrims on a journey to find Jesus, which we were. on one island excursion, we had to board a ferry directly from the cruise ship, so we couldn't take the wheelchair. We knew this going into it, though, so we planned on just making a short hop over and dip our toes in the water. I'm going to tell you what, the ocean was unbelievably blue. Unbelievably blue. And I've seen the ocean many different times in many different places, and never in my life have I seen water that blue. It was like somebody had taken 1 billion gallons of indigo food coloring and just dumped it into the ocean. It was so blue, it was surreal. Unlike anything I've ever seen before in my life. But we made it to the island without incident and walked most of its short length using a paved path that served as the island's main street. And it was lined with stores and shops, and we bought a backpack and 2 wood carving turtles, a mama turtle and her baby that could be connected to her back with a peg. And then we headed back to the ferry, strolling along the beach, collecting shells along the way. I'll show you something real quick. See that? Those are the shells, that's the staff, and that's the cross. And the pictures are from the wedding. So, I could tell Michelle was getting tired. As we headed back to the ferry, you know, she was wore out. It was a lot for her, and at this point, on the chemo, with the chemo and everything, and the lymphedema, she was really it was wearing her out, and her arm was hurting. She wasn't complaining about it, but I could tell it was hurting her. And she had to ration her pain meds for the trip, you know, because she wasn't going to, you know, be able to see the doctor until we got back. And she hadn't brought anything with her on this little outing that we were on, and she was regretting it. I could tell. But months prior to this, the dosage of her medicine had changed, her pain medicine. And she had an unfinished bottle of the old prescription. And they were a little weaker, but there were at least a dozen pills left in the bottle. And when I was packing, I saw the little bottle, and I brought them just in case she needed them. And I had them in the backpack that I carried with us. And when I handed the bottle to Michelle, tears welled up in her eyes, and she said, "You really are always looking out for me. Thank you, baby." I teared up a little bit too, just at how bad she was hurt, how much such a simple act meant to her, you know. And I truly believe that the comfort of having just those few extra pills made the cruise more enjoyable for her. Just that comfort of having that, knowing she wasn't going to run out, you know. And her pain was well managed for the rest of the trip. Now, I planned it so that when we got home, I still had a couple more days before I had to go back to work. So we were able to spend a little more time together, just loving on each other, just some idle time. And it may not have been Venice, but we enjoyed ourselves. And we had a beautiful time together. I can't even express how thankful I am that we made time for our honeymoon. Every moment that Michelle and I shared is precious to me. And every memory that we made together is a priceless treasure.